If you think that Mexico is cheap, I'm going to be honest with you. You probably need a bit of a reality check. And I say this with total love because look, Mexico is cheaper than Canada or the US or parts of Europe, but it's not always true. And that's the thing that I want to make sure that it's clear. Cheap and cheaper are two different words. So a lot of us foreigners typically want to come down here. We want to be able to go to restaurants and be able to do the things. And then at the end of the month, we look at our statements and go, wow, that was a really expensive meal or what. And this plays out over and over again. And for someone that has been down in Latin America for a long time and that lives in Centro in San Miguel de Allende, I don't eat out 4 times a week. I don't necessarily go to these super expensive restaurants and take pictures for Instagram. And because I don't want to get a situation where at the end of the month, I look at my statement and have the same reaction. So the problem that most people have here is that the country didn't lie to them. It's just the way that you showed up to Mexico. So in this video, I want to walk you through what is actually going on financially when you live in San Miguel de Allende or in Mexico in general. So in case you don't know me, my name is Mike Fanelli. I'm a real estate advisor here in San Miguel de Allende. I've been living in Latin America for about 13 years, and I have experience in relocation and real estate in Costa Rica and now in Mexico for a number of years. Now, before I get into any of the details, I want to tell you something. There's something specific about San Miguel's economy and how it actually works that almost nobody ever explains to you properly to foreigners before they move down here. And honestly, once you see it, the whole cost of living question makes sense for the very first time. I'll get into that in just a moment, but let's get into the video. All right. The first part is that I think most people get this wrong. Compared to major cities back home, for example, San Miguel de Allende is a relief to your wallet. The rent is more comfortable. It's cheaper. It's a fraction of the cost than Toronto, Los Angeles, or London, right? So the quality healthcare is much more affordable than anything back home. The scale, like the skilled labor, cleaning ladies, things of that nature are so cheap that you would think it's impossible to get that anywhere else in the world. So the baseline is real, right? And honestly, a lot of people from the US and Canada, Europeans, come here for that type of lifestyle. But that's not the entire story. The moment you start to try to replicate your life exactly the way that you had it back home is where the math really starts to change quickly. And what I mean is that, let's give you an example. You can go to a grocery store in San Miguel, like City Market, for example, and it's honestly one of the best supermarkets I've seen anywhere in a long time. Beautiful produce, imported wines and cheeses, all the things, right? Cuts of meats, everything that basically you have back home. Most of these products become very expensive. They need to travel, they clear customs, there's importation tax. And before they get in front of you, you're basically paying a premium. The grocery basket is full of US imported goods, wines from Europe. And the next thing you know, your shopping bill is huge. And the country is not going to subsidize your nostalgia. Like, this is just an example. If you purchase imported liquors, electronics, cosmetics, high-end appliances, there's something that's going to give. And usually it's something that goes across borders. So foreigners that arrive here and expecting their dollar to stretch dramatically, they don't shop the same way. They're not necessarily going to these places and trying to replicate. Now, if you're rich and you've got all the money in the world, that's great. But that may eventually catch up to you. That brings me another thing I want to mention at the start of this video. The thing the most nobody explains to you is once you see this, the cost of living question in Mexico starts to make sense finally for the first time for you. Here's what most expat blogs don't explain. And it's the single most important thing about living in Mexico or in San Miguel. San Miguel runs on 2 parallel economies, 2 completely set of roads. And it really comes down to where you decide to spend your money. So on one side, there's what I call the international tier, or the world-class steakhouses where dinners for 2 and a bottle of wine is going to cost you, 2,500 pesos or $130, $140 without even trying. Boutique cocktails, all of the fancy stuff that you would get in Manhattan, for example. And you can drop $100 very easily without breaking a sweat, even though you don't really sweat that often here in San Miguel. But honestly, it's pretty spectacular on what you can get yourself into as far as spending. But on the other end of it, in the same city, sometimes literally on the same block, even next door to each other, is what I call the other tier. And it's the authentic Mexican restaurant tier, where a generous bowl of pozole could be 100 pesos. So for like $6 US, you get a complete satisfying meal. Car tacos for 30 pesos, right? And that gets you a meal for $5 or $6 or $7. This is the wild part. Both tiers exist side by side in the city. Often on the same street, like I said, sometimes on the same block or right beside each other. The country isn't deciding your budget for you. You are every single day in every decision that you make. If you want to live like a foreigner and you want to live exactly like you want, I want the steakhouses and you have the money for it, great. Good for you. That's fantastic. But then don't complain and then say, oh, Mexico's really expensive if you want to live on the same tier. If you've come down to Mexico and you don't want to live on the same international tier, then you need to be on the Mexican tier, what I call of spending your money and going to restaurants. Remember, there's one specific choice I mentioned at the start of this video, the one that determines whether Mexico feels generous to you or feels expensive. Well, that choice is within these two tiers. You decided to live most of the time in a tier that maybe it's more expensive. And that is essentially the decision that you make. It's not the country setting the prices. Because the reality is that there are locals here that live on a fraction of the income that you make and make things happen just fine. They live just comfortably without complaining. Now, here's something that I've noticed about foreigners who are generally living well here on a modest budget. And I'd say that they have one specific thing in common. Okay. They've, to some degree, adopted the rhythm of the place instead of fighting against it. So they shop at the local tianguis and in the little neighborhood tiendas instead of the imports sales aisle, right? They eat seasonal Mexican produce, which is the way generally excellent and really inexpensive, like it's local fruits, right? They walk past the central restaurants and they go where the locals eat, instead of these fancy restaurants that are typically geared for tourists. They've learned Spanish to be able to negotiate respectfully and build relationship with vendors, to be able to have conversations. And honestly, they're not really sacrificing anything. I mean, they're just a better version of themselves, and they enjoy the food at a local family-run restaurant instead of spending hundreds of dollars at a steakhouse they can't afford because they decide that they want to live this type of lifestyle. They embrace the meal that is unhurried. They chill out. They go to a family place. They learn the customs, like saying provecho when you walk by a table. And, you're essentially buying back your time by saving. That's the version of San Miguel that a lot of foreigners who stayed here for 20, 30 years have embraced completely. And that's how they know that they're living in alignment and they feel good and they don't feel like it. And the foreigners who are the loudest about Mexico being expensive, in my experience, they're usually the ones that are living in that international tier I was talking about. And they don't embrace the local economy. They're not wrong with their numbers. It's true. Their numbers are accurate. They're just making the wrong choices. And the moment you start to begin choices that are in alignment with your budget and within Mexico, there's something for everyone in everyone's budget. It's just a matter of choice on whether you decide to take it or not. That being said, if you really want to dig into actual numbers of what a realistic monthly budget looks like in your lifestyle in the tier in San Miguel, and all of that stuff, head right to my website, MikeFanelli.com. I have a bunch of blogs there. They'll walk you through like housing, utilities, healthcare, groceries, and give you some honest numbers. The link is in the description below. And if you're starting to think seriously about, what your own numbers would look like here in San Miguel, definitely head to the website, download my buyer's guide if you're looking to purchase a property. It walks you through every single step, all the expenses, the move, all in plain language that I've used in this video. And if this video helped you, please go ahead and subscribe to my channel. There's more coming on what actually living in San Miguel or Mexico looks like. Again, I'm Mike Fanelli, and hopefully we'll see you in San Miguel. We'll see you on the next video.